That's been part of the problem in history, because by 1850, freshwater here to the southern Everglades was deemed the enemy to the state.
The trouble was water. Too much of it on one hand, not enough of it on the other.
And then in 1960, literally our federal government stopped any flow through the Shark River, which is the main river that dumps into Florida Bay, our largest seagrass beds in the world. And so for 4 years, no water was allowed to flow through this area. I mean, this is a wetland.
We're talking about some 15,000 square miles.
At one time, the Everglades stretched across most of the Florida peninsula south of Lake Okeechobee. The rich soils nurtured by the vast wetland made it prime real estate for a young country eager to use its natural resources for economic development.
It was really dense, succession dense. Succession, anything that has altered the original condition of the land. And in this case, it would have been deforestation, draining of the Everglades, which promoted anything to grow.
We have passed new laws to protect the environment, and we have mobilized the power of public concern. But there is much yet to be done.
Legislation to restore the Everglades began in the 1970s, but it wasn't until the 2000s that the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan, CERP, was authorized. To meet the objectives of this plan, the Recover Team, an essential part of the restoration process, was initiated. Their collaborative efforts, spanning across federal, state, local, and university initiatives, are crucial in capturing and analyzing real-time data for the restoration of the Everglades.
Recover is a collaborative of scientists, engineers, planners, modelers who take a system-wide perspective to collect and analyze data in order to inform Everglades restoration. We have a variety of indicators in order to assess the health of our estuaries. We have oysters, we have seagrass. In addition, for the greater Everglades, we collect information on periphyton, which is a primary food source for a lot of our prey species. We also collect information on prey species, invertebrates, fish, wading birds, alligators, crocodiles, and of course vegetation. The different communities throughout the Everglades, including sawgrass communities, marl prairie, and tree islands.
Recover is a multi-agency team. It is a partnership, and the restoration efforts continue through initiatives on the ground.
Alligators and crocodiles in general are tied to the water. They have this amphibious lifestyle, so they need land, and they nest in land, but they spend most of the time in the water. For the restoration of Everglades, the main point is bringing back the water right. And gators been living within that dynamic before we came here for years, centuries. And when we start modifying it, well, we just kind of broke that. Of course, whatever we did with the hydrology can be read through the ecology of gators. That's why we are using them as indicators, because if we see gators coming back, that means that we are doing something right about the hydrology.
Dotted with small tree islands.
Tree islands, basic level, they're one of the fundamental habitat types in the Everglades. They're pretty unique to the Everglades. Wildlife use them for nesting. They use them at night for resting, help them get out of the water. They provide cover. And, historically, they provided a lot of resources for the indigenous people. Out here in the natural environment, we have cameras on the tree islands to monitor wildlife populations. There's aerial surveys that are used to look at the landscape level, and down to sampling periphyton and looking down at the microscope at the algae. Data really ranges from microscopic to macroscopic and everything in between, and it's all used to provide information on how to better manage and restore it.
A short walk from the refuge is Lila, the Loxahatchee Impoundment Landscape Assessment. The 80-acre model is where Recover Team members like senior scientist Eric Klein, of the South Florida Water Management District, devotes his time to studying and caring for this dynamic landscape.
It was in the late 90s we conducted an experiment where we looked at the interaction between prey density, how many fish are in the marsh, and the depth of water, and looked at the interaction between the two in these little small 1 acre impoundments where we could manipulate the water depth and the density of prey. And so by doing that, we figured out that really the birds focus mainly on the water depth. That's their trigger to initiate foraging. It really has nothing to do with how many fish are in the marsh. And it fine-tuned our understanding of what depths are necessary for wading birds to forage in the natural system. But using that manipulative experimental approach, we could really fine-tune our understanding, and that kind of birthed the idea of a bigger project where we addressed more than just wading birds and fish, but we looked at tree islands, ridge and slough development, the relationship between how water moves in the system, how long it's wet, and when it gets wet, and all those sort of ecological components of the Everglades.
The Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan, CERP, relies on the data Recover collects from its partners. Without that critical information, we miss an opportunity.
If we don't collect information on our indicators, we could potentially have an effect that was unanticipated or unexpected, and we wouldn't be able to detect that in order to change course through adaptive management and make improvements. So without this information, we wouldn't be able to optimize our design or our operations in order to gain the most benefits across the ecosystem.
The importance of this data resonates far beyond the scientific community. It's a shared resource, crucial for those driving Everglades restoration and the residents who live, work, and play in Florida.